Section 4 of Told in the Gardens of Araby by Izora C. Chandler and Mary W. Montgomery. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Doug Wade. The story of the beautiful one who did not have her desire. The narrator of tales relates that, once upon a time, there lived a man and his wife who were so poor that they had no home. So the woman begged of her husband to seek a place for her in the bamam, or bathhouse. Now the bamam was a large building with many rooms. When the bamamji, or keeper, had listened to the tale of the poor man, he answered, "There will be room for your wife tomorrow. Let her come then." The husband returned with joy, and, on the morrow, accompanied his wife to the bamam, where the keeper made her quite welcome. In a few days there was born to the poor woman a little girl-child, who was like a ray of light for her beauty and sweetness. As the mother sat gazing upon her child, the wall of the bamam opened, and 3 dervishes made their appearance. Gifts were in their hands, of those things that would add to the woman's comfort. The first dervish approached with a great roll of very soft clothing. "Thou shalt name this child," said the dervish, "the beautiful one who does not obtain her desire." Thereupon he withdrew, and the second dervish came near, with a gift of sweet perfumes and ointments, and said, "Whenever water shall touch the crown of this child's head, it shall turn into pieces of gold and roll to the ground. Roses shall fall from about her cheeks whenever she laughs, and, if unhappily she shall weep, the tears will become pearls. When she is grown strong enough to walk upon the earth, green grass shall spring up in her footsteps." Having spoken thus, the second dervish disappeared. The third then drew near. His present consisted of a bracelet of gold. "Let this," said the third dervish, "be fastened about her arm. And if thou wouldst keep thy child alive, then thou must guard well this amulet. For as long as it remains upon her arm she shall live, but when it is removed, then death shall claim her." Thus saying, the third dervish disappeared, as has the others, and the walls of the bamam became as if they had not been opened. When the mother had recovered from her astonishment, she fastened the amulet upon the infant's arm, after which she began to bathe the little one. All went as is usual, until she poured water from the basin upon the child's head, when, as the second dervish had predicted, the water turned into gold pieces and fell to the ground in a shower. The mother gathered the money and hid it, after which she made haste to dress her child. When the little one had fallen asleep, she called the keeper of the bamam, and, giving him a handful of coins, bade him send her for her husband. The keeper was surprised at receiving such an amount from one who had seemed so poor, but, being a wise man, he asked no questions, and did as he had been requested. When the husband came, he greeted his wife and their newborn beautiful infant, after which his wife told him of the visit from the 3 dervishes and the wonderful things they had each foretold. The poor man was nearly beside himself for joy that now he would be able fitly to provide for his beloved little family. Tenderly he lifted the child in his arms, and together they two set out to seek an abiding place. They ordered a fine large house built and completely furnished. Back of the house they caused a beautiful garden to be planted. In the middle of this garden the fortunate parents ordered a kiosk builded, and when it was finished they called the goldsmith and bade him cover it with gold. This he did, and when the work was completed its beauty could not be described, it was so great. Thus did these happy parents prepare a worthy place for the child whose coming had brought them such good and great fortune. The kiosk was made the immediate dwelling place of the little one, who was guarded most tenderly. And, as the years went by, it continued unto them as the second dervish had said, until they grew to possess such wealth that they lost all idea of its value. Time came and went until 15 years had passed, and never in all the world had there been so beautiful a blue-eyed, golden-haired, rosy-cheeked damsel. To one who looked at her, it was as if the sun had arisen. We will now leave these people and go far away, unto the son of the king at Yemen. It must have been that Allah intended the beautiful girl to be the wife of the young prince, for, one night, a dream was sent to him in which she appeared. He was told her name, her father's dwelling, and the exact country in which was her dwelling. So very real was her presence, and so clear the picture of her home, that, upon waking, his heart was torn with sorrow that it was only a dream. He called for a piece of parchment, and made a chart of the way through which they must pass who should go to bring her unto him. When the morning dawned, the young prince went directly to his queen mother and, coming to speech, said, "My honored mother, may Allah give happiness to you. Last night, whether sleeping or waking I know not, but a marvelous vision passed before my eyes. I am so haunted with the memory of it that life will be unto me as nothing if thou do not realize my vision unto me." To which the queen made reply, "What is this that thou askest of me, O my son? Well thou knowest that my heart is as thine, when the happiness of my child is concerned. Speak. Relate unto me the vision, then ask what thou wilt, and, if Allah forbid it not, it shall be done for thee." "O mother," the young man responded, "in a certain garden is a kiosk. It is covered with beaten gold. But, beautiful as is the casket, much more beautiful is the treasure for which it was created. The kiosk have I seen, and the way unto it so plainly was shown to me that I have here a chart of that way, even of the waters which lead unto it. And what does the casket contain that it can be worthy of such magnificent, and worthy thus to disturb the peace of my son? Within this kiosk, O my mother, there dwelleth a maiden who is innocent, gracious, pure, and altogether charming. So innocent is she that at her smile roses form beside her cheeks and fall about her. So gracious is she that when water is poured upon her head, it turns into golden coins, with which can be done beneficent things. So pure is she that when, perchance through grief at another's woe, she may be caused to weep, the tears change to pearls as they fall to the ground. And so charming is her presence that, wherever she may walk, even upon the most barren earth, soft grasses spring up to kiss her feet. When he had spoken thus, the queen replied, It is well, O my son, that thy beginning is as one who telleth a dream. For this that thou relatest to me is an impossible thing. There is no golden kiosk. There can be no maiden with this remarkable power. Then was the young man grieved as he answered, And is it thus that my mother turns aside that which concerns my life or my death? Since thou wilt not believe me, then inquire of others. If it be false unto them all, then let it be false unto thee. The love which his mother felt for her son and her grief at his sorrow caused her to send for the public criers, who are, also, the newsmongers of that country. As these passed before the queen, the prince caused that each one should be questioned as to whether, in all the countries he knew, there were such a garden in which dwelt so good and charming a maiden. Each crier was astonished at so strange a question, until one came who knew of the garden, the golden kiosk, and the charming maiden. Prostrating himself before the royal personages, he made this answer, True it is, O prince, that there is such a place, and that such a being really exists. The outside of the garden I do know well, but the walls are high and difficult to scale. One day, however, when I was without, the gates were opened to permit the entrance of a visitor, and the maiden of whom thou speakest walked before the golden kiosk that stands beside a fountain in the middle of the garden. And, between the opening and the closing of the gate, I was permitted that I should witness the wonders of which thou questionest. Neither the prince nor his mother had further doubts concerning the truth of the vision. Honored mother, the prince entreated, if thou really dost love me as thou sayest, then permit me to beg that, with thy slaves and guard, thou shouldst embark upon the morrow and seek out this maiden. If these things be really true of her, and if she be willing, engage her to me and cause that she return with thee. Upon the morrow the mother set out to fulfill the request of her son. The way was long, and several months passed before the ship reached the far distant country. After disembarking, she, with her attendants, entered the city and asked the way. It was pointed out to them. They went to the house and knocked at the door. It was opened, and they were permitted to enter. The queen was invited into the garden, where, very often, the guests were received. Here her eyes discovered the golden kiosk. She also was so fortunate as to find the parents, together with their daughter whom she was seeking. After sitting down, they all conversed courteously, and the visitor was more than delighted with the presence and manner of the young girl. But her real object was to test the truth of those qualities which were ascribed to her. Accordingly she said, Verily, my child, it will trouble you greatly, but I am wearied with my long journey, and would be gratified if you would bring a glass of water, with which to quench my thirst. Then the maiden graciously arose, and hastened to bring water unto this guest from a far country. And everywhere that her light feet touched the earth, soft grass sprang up. This caused astonishment and delight in the mind of the queen, who took the cup when it was presented to her, and, as the young hostess made obeisance in its presentation, contrived to spill a few drops of the water upon the beautiful bowed head. The drops immediately rolled off as gold pieces. At this the queen, as if as a paroxysm of weariness, caught the girl by the wrist and held so tightly that her nails entered the soft flesh. Although no cry came from the sweet lips, tears were forced to form in her eyes. Those tears afterwards dropped upon the ground in exquisite pearls. Then the visitor seemed to recover herself and related a story of her adventures while on the way thither. The tale was so amusing that the young girl began to smile, at which instant a rose appeared near each exquisite cheek and dropped upon the rug on which the visitor sat. There was now no longer any doubt in the mind of the queen. The object of her journey had been gained. She therefore discovered her rank to the parents, after which she said to them, Verily, we have heard of the beautiful qualities of this, your daughter. By the will of Allah, and according to the law of the Prophet, I would marry her unto my son, the prince. What is your will concerning this? Then were the parents greatly astonished and pleased. The mother, coming to speech, made this reply, Oh, my queen, we will not refuse our daughter to such as you. Your orders are upon our heads, and may Allah graciously give his blessing. Then the queen engaged the daughter unto her son, after which she gave directions, saying, With the half of my slaves and the half of my guard will I now return. With those that remain do you conduct your daughter with all speed to our palace. Verily, we shall make haste with the preparations for the wedding and the festivities. Thereupon the lady queen arose, embraced the maiden most tenderly, made her adieus, and, taking the half of her slaves and of her guard, began her homeward journey. When, after many days, she reached the palace, the prince came to welcome her and asked eagerly concerning the result of her quest. "Most happy am I to answer thee, O my son," was the glad reply. "Verily, it is according to that which the vision revealed unto thee. There liveth such a maiden as thou hast believed in, and all those bright qualities belong unto her. One who sees her desires to look again, of such beauty as she possessed. I have been so fortunate as to engage her unto thee. She will come to thee presently." When the prince learned this, great fear lest evil should befall her whom his soul desired came upon him. His mind became filled with sadness. His hands and feet began to tremble. He bent to kiss his mother's hands, after which he sat down and was lost in meditation. As preparations for the wedding began, he could only look with grave and longing eyes along the road over which his betrothed was to come. Let these remain here while we return to the other place in the story. Heavy silken garments were prepared, with all skill, for the maiden who had been engaged to the prince. They were bound into a great package. All things necessary for the journey were made ready, when the mother, wishing to make certain changes in her own wardrobe, called the woman who had been nurse to her daughter, and said unto her, "Verily, I give into your care a most precious charge. Take my daughter, whom before this I have entrusted to you, watch over her most carefully, and with these slaves and guard conduct her safely to Yemen, to the palace of the king. After a few days her father and I will follow, with all speed." Thereupon the nurse asked permission that her own daughter might accompany them, as the way was long, the distance very great, and her heart would be sore at the parting. Permission was granted, and the little company embarked. At evening, when the bride-to-be asked for food, the nurse made answer, "Fearing that harm might come to thee from eating of the ship's rations, I prepared such food as is best for one who journeys, for the first time, upon the sea." So saying, she cut off some slices of salted sausage, which she had prepared especially for an evil purpose, and gave them to the girl. In about a half an hour, the maiden became very thirsty. "O mother," she asked of the nurse, "give me some water, I pray." To this the woman made reply, "It is not well that you should have water now." And, although the same request was spoken frequently, no water was permitted to come near the maiden. As the night wore on, her thirst became more violent, until at last she was maddened with it and cried, "Give me water, or let me die." Then the evil woman said, "My girl, if you will let me take out one of your eyes, you shall have water, but otherwise you shall have none." To which, after this cruel reply had been repeated many times, the sufferer made answer, "It is possible to live with only one eye, but impossible to live without water. Take thy desire, and give unto me mine." The woman, overjoyed, made haste to remove one of the eyes, after which she permitted her charge a slight draught of water. But this could not long appease such thirst had been created by the salted sausage. Again the poor girl moaned, "Verily, mother, I am thirsty," to which was made no answer. As the hours wore on and the suffering grew past all endurance, the woman said again, "Verily, girl, if you will give me the other eye, I will give you as much water as you can wish." What could the poor girl do? Beside herself with thirst and maddened with pain, she hesitated but little. Then, losing all self-control, sobbed, "Alas, what evil is come upon me! I am powerless in your hands. Do unto me whatever you will, only permit me to quench this thirst, which devours my throat and causes my tongue to swell." The woman, delighting in evil, removed the other eye, and afterward gave all the water desired by the sufferer. It was swallowed eagerly, but alas, although her thirst was assuaged, she had been made blind. Now all this happened while the slaves and guard were in another part of the ship, and only the wicked nurse and her daughter were near to her who was to become bride to the young prince. As the ship neared land, the nurse removed the bridal clothing from her charge and put it upon her own daughter, whose face she covered with a veil. The clothes of her own girl were put upon the maiden, and her face was covered as before. Upon landing, the nurse said to the others, "Do you remain here for a little while I conduct my daughter to the house of a relative, where she will stay until my return." She then led the maiden without the city and left her alone upon a mountain. After that she wrote a letter to the parents of the maiden and gave it to the master of the port, with the command that he should find, upon the next incoming ship, the person to whom it was addressed and deliver it to them. The letter read as follows: "Do not continue your journey. Your daughter died upon the way to this port. She was buried in the deep sea. As for me, my grief is so great that I shall never return." Having done this, she hastened to rejoin those whom she had left, and the little company proceeded upon its journey to the palace. The nurse's daughter guarded the secret well, so that no one dreamed of the sad thing that had happened. With all speed they pressed upon their way, and were soon met by the people of the palace, who conducted the woman and her daughter into the presence of the queen. Now, the lady queen, after greeting the girl, who was brought to her in the most splendid attire, regarded her attentively and said to herself, "This is not the one who so charmed me in the quiet garden. There is something wrong. Let us see what the end will bring us." With this seeming discovery, she sat down to meditate, while the girl, who desired to become a princess, was led to her own room, and everyone about the palace made haste with preparations for the wedding. That evening they married the nurse's daughter to the prince, and all of the guests drank a royal drink from cups that were brilliant with gems. Afterward the prince said to her who would become his bride, "I wonder greatly that, with all these festivities, not once have you smiled." Then, although she smiled at his word, which was a command coming as it did from a prince, there occurred nothing at all unusual. Neither roses nor the fragrance of roses filled the air about her cheeks. At this the prince, beginning to doubt, said to himself, "Most wonderful things have been told me concerning the maiden who was to become my princess, not one of which has manifested itself during the coming of this person." After reflecting thus, he determined to speak of that which disturbed his mind. "My princess," he said very gently, "it was related to me that when you laughed, roses formed near your cheeks. But nothing of that kind came to pass with your laughter just now. What is the meaning of this?" "My lord," was the careful answer, "that which has been told you is true, but it only happens once during each year." Thus the questionings of the prince quieted for a while. When it was morning and the princess was led to the bath, the queen mother came to accompany her. While one of the slaves washed the face of the girl, the mother approached her with a cup of water. "Permit me, my child," said she, and straightway poured the contents of the cup upon the girl's head. Not a gold piece made its appearance. At this, although she uttered not a word, the queen's suspicions were strengthened. However, taking the girl's hand, she led her from the bath, and together they hastened to the palace, where the one who had been made princess sat down by herself, quietly. "Let these people stay here while we return to the helpless one, who had been deserted upon the mountain." Her poor blind eyes could not cease their wailing until, as the result of her tears, a wall of pearls, as high as a man, piled itself before her. A muleteer, who was coming from the other side of the mountain, followed his path until it led him near the suffering one. He was lost in astonishment and pity at what he saw. And when he could recover himself, he approached the maiden and said, "Ay, my girl, what fate has brought you to this plight?" "Ay, Baba," being interpreted, means father. "Do not ask me. Providence has ordained it. I must be patient." Thereupon the muleteer, by her direction, gathered up the pearls and put them into the donkey's panniers, after which he took the blind girl by the hand and led her to his own home. "Wife," said he, "take good care of this poor maiden, whom I found in great distress. Let no more harm come to her." The wife noted the extraordinary beauty of the stranger and was deeply touched at her suffering. She led her into an inner chamber and cared for her as if she had been their own child. After a time, when these people gently questioned her, the poor girl related her story from beginning to end. "Alas, what a pity!" they both exclaimed. And their sympathy was so sweet to her that, lifting her face toward them, a sweet smile passed over it. At this, roses bloomed near her cheeks. The muleteer and his wife were speechless with astonishment, but she, taking the roses in her hands, held them toward the old man. "Kind Baba, if you would try to help me out of this sorrow, take these roses, lay them in a basket, and, calling aloud that you are selling roses out of season, go past the palace of him who should be my husband. Should you be asked how great is your price for them, you must say that you do not sell for money, but that you will give each handful of roses only in exchange for an eye." "So be it, my poor child," answered the kind old man. "With the morning I shall do as you request." Accordingly, upon the morrow, the muleteer, with the roses in a basket upon his shoulder, set out upon his journey. As he neared the palace, he began to cry, "Roses! Roses out of season! I am selling roses that are out of season." The false one heard the cry and said to her mother, "There is a man with roses. Let us buy some, that I may give them to the prince. I will tell him that they grew in my cheeks this morning. Perchance I shall find more favor in his sight." Those two, with the evil hearts, ran quickly to the door of the palace and summoned the muleteer as he was passing. When he heard the voices, he turned. They motioned him to come. He approached and let the basket down from his shoulders. As the beautiful flowers caught the eyes of the girl, she asked eagerly, "Well, gardener, for how much will you sell the roses?" To which came the answer as directed, "For money I will not part with them. Only for an eye will I exchange each handful." The mother and daughter looked at each other. "Do not fear," said the mother in a low voice. "He cannot know." "Very well, mother," replied the daughter in a whisper. "Although you did not know it, I placed the eyes of the one whom we destroyed in her box. Do you detain him while I hasten to bring them? The prince must have roses today." So saying, she hastened and speedily brought the eyes, gave them to the supposed gardener, and received the exquisite roses in return. The muleteer delivered the roses, and, without tarrying, hastened home, where, with his wife, he almost ran to the room of their adopted daughter. "Rejoice, thou wronged one!" cried they both. "The sight will be restored." The maiden was overjoyed at this. She arose and, taking pure water, performed ablutions, after which she prostrated herself twice to obtain the favor of Allah. Then, raising her hands, she prayed. Allah was gracious. The prayer was heard. The blind girl reached forth her hands, and the muleteer let them touch the box in which there were the precious things. She took first one, then the other, and replaced it. At that very instant, by the will of Allah, sight returned unto her, and she looked out upon his earth. So kind was he that her eyes were better even than before. Thereupon, with joyful heart, she returned thanks unto him, after which she prayed. Some time passed, and whenever the maiden laughed, roses bloomed about her cheeks. Whenever she walked, soft grasses sprang up joyfully, and whenever she bathed, great coins of gold ran down off her head. She grieved at the loss of her own mother, but patiently waited the will of Allah. Meanwhile, the kind-hearted muleteer seemed to her like a father, and she grew very fond of the old couple. As for those who were sheltering her, they became so rich through the presence of this maiden that they built a great house and filled it with servants, both men and women. And in this house, the most beautiful apartment of all was set apart for the young girl whose coming had so enriched them. But, as the days went by, the maiden grew sad and made of the Baba a strange request. "Father," she said, "I would have you build me a tomb, made of shimshirik stone. Within there shall be a golden casket, and the doors of the tomb shall be wrought so marvelously that they shall speak. Once every hour they must open, and, as they turn in each direction, they must say again and again, 'The beautiful one who did not have her desire.'" Then was the muleteer sad of heart. "My daughter," he answered, "let the tomb be as you desire. If Allah wills, it shall be builded with this blessing." Still heavy of heart, he arose and went to the top of the mountain, where, at great cost, he caused such a tomb to be made as it had been described. It was all of shimshirik stone, and within was a golden casket. Also the doors opened of themselves and repeated the words that had been commanded. After having finished the tomb, the old man found it so perfect that he stayed for a long time to admire. Then he went home and said to his foster daughter, "Behold, I have made the tomb as you requested. I beg that you will be sad no longer. Let us leave these three persons here, while we return to the intruders in the palace." As soon as the wicked daughter of the wicked woman had secured the roses from the supposed gardener, she arrayed herself in the most beautiful of the robes which had been stolen from the other, and taking the roses in her hands, carried them to the prince. Now the roses were marvelously beautiful, and their fragrance was something passing sweet. When, therefore, the prince had received them, he laid them against his face, and it seemed as if he could never have enough of them. When she who had brought them saw this, it began to appear to her whence these flowers had come, and, as the prince was so enamored of their sweetness as to forget her very presence, anger and fear began to stir her breast. All the night through she lay and pondered upon the roses, the strange price, and the rapture of the young prince. When morning dawned, she hastened to her mother with the startling announcement. "Mother, most surely the girl whom we have supposed dead is yet alive. She is not far away. At any moment she may overthrow our plans. Hasten, let us send a witch to find her, and, after that, to remove the amulet from her arm. Then, surely, she must die." Throughout the night the mother had been troubled in like manner, and of herself had resolved that something must be brought about to prevent their undoing. Therefore she was quite ready to accept the advice of her daughter, and ordered a slave to conduct her to the tent of a witch, to whom she told a false story and ended with the order her daughter had suggested. Now the witch as well was evil-minded. She listened carefully and promised to accomplish the difficult task for the great sum of money which was offered her. When the woman had gone from the tent, she made incantations. Afterwards she set out, and did not pause until the very door of the muleteer's house was reached. It opened at her knock, and she was led upstairs, into the room where the muleteer, his wife, and their foster daughter received their guests. Here she was graciously admitted and bidden to sit down. After a little while it became evening, whereupon the witch said, "Ay, mother, I have journeyed a long way. It is now late. I am afraid to continue my journey at night. Indeed, the very reason of my call was to ask you if you would permit me to pass the night under your roof." The muleteer's wife was not pleased with this. She had not been pleased with the presence of the witch. Still, it is incumbent upon the faithful to be hospitable. Accordingly she answered, "Very well, mother. Here is a room. Enter it and lie down in peace. But first, wait until the evening meal is prepared. We would have you partake of it with us." Very greatly was the witch pleased with this. She watched stealthily to learn which was the maiden's room, and, after that, went to her own and lay down. Soon all the household were in their beds and asleep. When midnight came, the witch arose and stole to the maiden's door, entered it, and went directly to the bed upon which the young creature lay in a sound, sweet sleep. Creeping closely to the bedside, she unclasped the gold band from the girl's arm, then hastened to her own room, put on her cloak and sandals, and left the house. From thence she hastened to the palace, and, in the very early morning, delivered up the stolen jewel to the mother of the false princess. It was received with great rejoicing by both of the evil plotters. They permitted themselves to be happy again, now that they felt assured of the death of her whom they had feared. Let these remain quiet while we return to the muleteer's wife. When morning came, she arose and, with misgiving, went to the room which had been given to their weird visitor. It was as she feared. The room was empty. Then, hoping against fear, she looked to see if the woman's cloak could be found. That too had disappeared. Thus was her fear confirmed and her perplexity increased. She then went to seek her foster daughter, but, finding her asleep, would not waken her, and returned to her own room. The hours dragged by. It was near noon, and the maiden, an early riser, had not appeared. The foster mother began speaking to herself. This child, whom Allah graciously sent to us, used always to rise very early. Now today, when the person to whom we gave food and shelter has acted so as to perplex my soul, does this daughter delay her daily coming to me? I will go and awaken her. Accordingly, filled with vague alarm, she hastened to the door and called with a tender voice, "Oh, my daughter, why do you sleep so long?" No answer came to her words. Again she called, and again listened in vain. Not the slightest sound greeted her anxious ear. She entered the door, approached the bed, and leaned over the unconscious figure. But, leaning and listening, she found not the faintest breath past those quiet lips. In desperate haste, she clasped the cold hands and began to chafe the delicate feet. Alas, they were like ice. Then, indeed, did the heart of the muleteer's wife become sore. She threw herself upon the floor, began beating her head against it, and, as she did so, she mourned, "Ay, my girl is dead. Henceforth shall the world be accursed to me." Her husband heard the cry. He hastened to her and begged to know the cause of such grief. Whereupon she answered, "Ay, my lord, our girl, whom we love and whom we had taught to love us, is dead. Alone, in the night, did she die. I cannot contain myself for grief." When the muleteer heard this, and after he had assured himself of its truth, tears like rain began to flow from his eyes. Then the whole household came to join in mourning the death of the beautiful girl. After a time when they could restrain their grief, they prepared her body and laid it in the tomb which she, with sad prophecy, had caused to be builded. This done, these good people did not mend their grief, but continued to mourn the gracious presents which had been lent to them for a little while. Let us leave them now, and return to the plotting mother in the prince's palace. When this evil-minded person learned, through inquiries which she cautiously set on foot, that the one whom she had wronged was dead, it became to her as if all the world were her own. And, without seeming to realize that Allah knew of the evil which she had committed, she even dared to attribute her fortune to him. "Oh, praise be to Allah!" she cried. "At last we are freed from fear." Later on, the prince heard, through some visitors at the court, such part of the dead maiden's history as was known to the world, that about such time as she had been found in great distress by the muleteer, whose kind heart had prompted him to take her to his own home, where she had become as a daughter in his house, and that immediately upon her coming the fates had blessed the old man and his wife, until they had houses and lands, men and women and servants. But after all this had come to them, and when life seemed complete, the blackest of grief had overshadowed them in the death of their adopted child. This tale wrought deeply upon the mind of the prince. He sighed in his soul and became very sad. After that, some strange fantasy possessed him. He could no longer endure the presence of the girl who had come to dwell in his palace. One day, when his soul was more than usually sad, together with his companions, he went out to wander upon the mountains. After several days, they came to the foot of one that was higher than the others in the range. It was evening. Wearied with this aimless pacing hither and thither, they sat down to rest. All at once a faint, faint voice reached the ear of the prince, and the words that it spoke were these: "The beauty who did not have her desire. The beauty who did not have her desire." Without a moment's pause to consider whether it might be a lure into danger, the prince, who was brave of heart, arose with his companions and hastened to the summit of this mountain. There he came upon a tomb of Shimshiric stone, so brilliant as to dazzle the eyes of a beholder, and its doors, opening of themselves both inward and outward, were repeating softly the words that had arrested his attention. All this aroused great wonder in the minds of the prince and his companions. They questioned concerning the building of so magnificent a burial place, and whether any body had been placed therein. After a time, as was quite natural, a sad curiosity prompted the prince himself to enter. Only a golden casket, with closed lid, met his gaze. Presently he approached, and, as the lid was unfastened, raised it and discovered within a young woman who was like the full moon for beauty, and beside her a child which reflected her brightness. The child nestled against the arm of its mother. At this sight the prince, who had been prepared for any marvelous unfolding, became even more tender of heart. His eyes filled with tears, and he gave thanks for, at least, the preservation of the infant. He lifted the child very tenderly, wrapped it in the snowy silken covering, and, holding it closely in his arms, rejoined his companions, who awaited him without the tomb. They all returned directly to the palace. As they entered, the prince summoned the queen, the girl who had come to him, her mother, and gave command that the child be recognized as one of the chief members in the royal household. To the girl he said, "You are young and strong. It is my will that you devote yourself to the care of this babe. See that he does not cry, while I go outside and give orders concerning his ablutions." Now, the child, being strong and well grown, had freed itself from the detaining hands of the prince and slipped to the floor. After his going, it wandered, with uncertain childish footsteps, about the room, playing with whatever object attracted its attention. In this way it went up to an open drawer in which lay the bracelet, which the witch had removed from the arm of its own mother. In a moment the bright object was in the tiny hands. This sight caused a great shock to the girl who was tending him. She flew to recover the precious trinket, but the child would not let go of it. He tightened his hold and, opening his mouth, began to scream lustily. The prince heard the cry. He came within and asked angrily why she was making the child cry, to which she made reply, "But, my lord, the babe has my bracelet. It is only because I would take it from him that he cries." "If it were 20 bracelets, let him play," was the response. But, as is often the manner with children when in a strange place, this one, having once begun, would not cease his crying. Nothing would appease him. It seemed as if he would cry his little heart out. Thereupon the prince took him in his arms, called his companions, and, with all speed, hastened to the tomb of the Shimshirek stone. It was the end of the hour, and the doors, opening inward and outward of themselves, were uttering the same plaintive words which had greeted his ears at the first. The prince quickened his pace, entered the tomb, raised the lid of the golden casket, and laid the child where he had found it, beside the mother. As he did this, the bracelet, of which the little fingers had not once let go, touched the white arm of the woman. At the contact her mouth began to quiver, and, from the waist downward, she became alive. Her feet grew warm and stirred. This marvelous occurrence was most unexpected. Everything was as it had been at the finding of the child, save, there was the bracelet. And, as he scanned the arm more closely, the prince was convinced that it had been accustomed to the wearing of a band, the exact width of that which the child, in its grief, had brought away from the palace. Immediately upon noting this, the prince was filled with more wonder. He felt assured that the bracelet must be an amulet from which some life-giving power emanated. He therefore took it up from the child's hand, who, strange to relate, yielded it up willingly, and clasped it about the lifeless arm. His thoughtfulness was rewarded. While he stood breathless, a slight convulsion stirred the figure of the woman. She sneezed, and, after that effort, made a slow movement and sat up in the casket. The child clung to her with a new zeal, and she, gathering him tenderly to her bosom, turned with wide-open eyes to regard the tall young personage who stood beside her. That he was of royal birth was evidenced by his bearing. The evidence was continued in his costume. The mystery of life and death was upon her, therefore were her thoughts clear. At once she was impressed that this must be the prince of whom she had been the promised bride. The prince, upon his part, already had been won. How much more strongly, then, was his heart drawn to her when he beheld her living, breathing, moving. He made courtly obeisance, and thus addressed himself to her. "My queen, is it permitted me to ask before whom I have the honor to stand? And whose is this child which already possesses my heart?" To which the beautiful one, looking first at him and then at the child, made answer, "My prince, I left my mother at Stamboul, and, with slaves and guard, in charge of my former nurse and in company of her daughter, I was coming to be your bride. Upon the way the nurse, who had been trustworthy until then, became jealous for the advancement of her own daughter. First she took out my eyes, then she exchanged our clothing, and finally left me upon a mountain, alone, to die of grief and starvation. But Allah heard the falling of my tears. He caused a kind old muleteer to pass that way, who, when he espied me, was moved with compassion and led me to his house, where both he and his wife received me as if I had been their own child. Shortly afterward I caused some roses that had bloomed at my cheeks to be cried before your palace, with the command that they be not sold for gold, but only by the exchange of an eye, for each handful could they be obtained. The evil ones saw the roses. They would secure them as a present to your royal highness. Eagerness weakened their wisdom to such extent that they accepted the condition, and thereby did I recover my eyes. As I put them in place, by Allah's grace, they became seeing. Finally, the roses which I sent were given to you, who received them and experienced a strange influence. At that very time a golden-winged messenger appeared to me, bearing this child in his arms and saying, 'He will be kept for you until you shall lie in your tomb. Do not fear, all will yet be well.' Then I caused this tomb to be builded, and, shortly after, a witch was sent by my undoers, who stole this life-keeping amulet from my arm. At that moment I died. They laid me in this tomb, where I have remained until, at your approach, the golden-winged messenger again approached and left the child beside me. I could stir neither hand nor foot. As to the child, O Prince, it is yours. It was created in paradise when you were holding the roses to your face." As this tale unfolded itself and the willing listener was convinced of its truth, he wept so bitterly at all her sufferings that the tears might have been of blood. Then, recovering himself, he clasped the narrator to his heart. He then lifted her out of the casket, gave her his arm to lean upon, and, taking the child upon his other arm, and surrounded by his attendants, conducted her to his palace. After his queen mother had received them, and, summoning slaves, had made the mother and child comfortable in a most luxurious apartment, the prince commanded that the wicked nurse and her daughter should appear before him, when he ordered the chief headsman to strike them dead. The man gave them each so heavy a blow that their bones rattled, their souls were dispatched to Hades, and their bodies were thrown to the dogs. Then the prince rejoiced greatly, saying, "Praise be to Allah, that, at last, he has freed me from those evil vixens. Now has my head become clear again." Afterward, he sent fleet messengers to bring the parents of her whom they had thought dead. And he also called the kind muleteer and his wife. In the presence of all these, and of his court, was he married to the beautiful one, whose light footstep caused the grass to grow upon the driest earth, whose laughter filled his life with roses, and whose tears, even tears of joy at her newly found happiness, became pearls before his eyes. The wedding festivities extended throughout the kingdom. They continued during 40 days and 40 nights. The prince and his beautiful wife, and the child which had been given to them, lived happily ever afterward. With the great sums of gold which rolled from the head of the true princess whenever she performed her ablutions, the prince was able to pay the great debts which the late war had entailed upon his country. Thus were his people relieved of the heavy taxes. Salam. End of section 4.